The Norse Vikings, originating from the Scandinavian regions of modern-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, emerged as one of the most formidable and influential warrior cultures in history. Spanning from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, the Viking Age is characterized by extensive seafaring, raiding, and exploration. Viking society was hierarchically organized into several strata, with kings and jarls, nobles, at the top, followed by carls, free men, and thralls, slaves, at the bottom. This structure was crucial in maintaining order and cohesion, especially during military campaigns and raids. At the core of this society was a deeply ingrained warrior ethos, where martial prowess and honor were paramount. Central to Viking culture was the concept of honor and reputation. The Norse sagas and Eddas are replete with tales of heroic deeds and valor, reflecting the societal emphasis on martial excellence. Warriors sought to achieve drengskaper, valiant behavior, and semd, honor, often striving to gain a place in Valhalla, the hall of the slain warriors ruled by Odin. This warrior ethos not only motivated individual bravery, but also fostered a sense of collective identity and purpose among Viking warriors. Viking boys were introduced to martial training at a young age, learning to handle weapons such as swords, axes, and spears. Physical activities like wrestling and running were common, building strength, endurance, and agility. This early training was essential, as young men were expected to participate in raids and battles by their early teens. The Vikings employed a variety of combat techniques, both on land and at sea, tailored to specific battle scenarios. The Viking shield wall, known as Skjaldborg in Old Norse, is one of the most iconic and effective military tactics employed by the Norse warriors during the Viking Age. This formation was pivotal in Viking combat strategy, enabling them to maximize their defensive capabilities while maintaining an offensive stance. This article delves into the intricacies of the Viking shield wall, exploring its origins, structure, deployment, effectiveness, and impact on Viking warfare and beyond. The concept of the shield wall predates the Vikings, with similar tactics used by ancient Greek hoplites and Roman legions. However, the Vikings adapted and refined the technique to suit their unique combat needs and conditions. The harsh Scandinavian environment and the nature of Viking warfare, which included frequent raiding and battles against well-armed foes, necessitated a reliable and adaptable defensive formation. The Viking shield wall was not just a military formation, but a reflection of their societal values of teamwork, discipline, and mutual support. It capitalized on the Viking warrior ethos, where the collective strength of the group was paramount. This formation allowed them to hold their ground against numerically superior foes and provided a platform for launching effective counterattacks. The shield wall was typically composed of a single line of warriors standing shoulder to shoulder, each holding a large round shield. The edges of the shields overlapped, creating an almost impenetrable barrier. Warriors in the front line were usually the most experienced and strongest, capable of withstanding and delivering powerful blows. The front line consisted of the most robust and skilled warriors who held their shields firmly against the enemy's onslaught. They were responsible for absorbing the initial impact and maintaining the integrity of the wall. The second line provided support by thrusting spears or wielding axes over the shoulders of the frontline fighters. This layer of attack ensured that the enemy faced continuous pressure and potential injury, even if they managed to breach the front line. Additional rows of warriors in the rear provided depth to the formation, ready to step forward and replace fallen or fatigued comrades. They also hurled projectiles such as spears and axes at the enemy. The Viking shield, typically made of wood with a central iron boss, was both lightweight and sturdy. The round shape allowed for easy maneuverability and effective coverage. The overlapping of shields in the wall created a unified front that distributed the force of incoming blows across multiple shields, reducing the risk of any single shield breaking under pressure. When on the defensive, the shield wall allowed Viking warriors to hold their ground against charges and projectile attacks. The formation was particularly effective in narrow passes or on uneven terrain where the enemy's numerical advantage could be negated. Offensively, the shield wall provided a base from which warriors could push forward, gradually advancing while maintaining cohesion. The front line would advance in unison, using their shields to shove the enemy back and create openings for spear thrusts and axe swings. The Viking shield wall was adaptable, capable of adjusting to different battlefield conditions. It could be curved to envelop enemies, angled to protect flanks, or broken into smaller segments to maneuver around obstacles. This flexibility made it a versatile tool in the Viking arsenal, suitable for various combat scenarios. One of the most famous instances of the shield wall's use was during the Battle of Stamford Bridge. The Viking army, led by Harold Hardrada, initially formed a shield wall to defend against the Anglo-Saxon forces of King Harold Godwinson. Despite being eventually overwhelmed, the Viking shield wall demonstrated significant resilience and inflicted heavy casualties on the attackers. The sight of a well-formed shield wall was often enough to intimidate opponents. The solidarity and impenetrability of the formation could demoralize and disrupt the enemy's plans, making them hesitant to engage directly. This psychological edge was a significant factor in the Vikings' numerous battlefield successes. Viking berserkers, known for their unparalleled ferocity and fearlessness in battle, are among the most legendary figures in Norse history and mythology. These warriors were said to enter a trance-like state of fury, granting them superhuman strength and resilience. This article aims to provide an in-depth exploration of Viking berserkers, examining their origins, characteristics, role in Viking society, combat techniques, cultural significance, and the enduring legacy of these formidable fighters. Berserkers were believed to enter a state of Berserkergang, a trance-like fury that made them nearly invincible. In this state, they exhibited uncontrollable rage, superhuman strength, and immunity to pain and wounds. This fury was often compared to the behavior of wild animals, particularly bears and wolves. Berserkers were often depicted wearing animal skins, particularly those of bears and wolves, which symbolized their connection to these powerful animals. This attire not only provided psychological intimidation, but also had symbolic significance, as they were thought to channel the spirits and strengths of these beasts. They were known for their extreme aggressiveness and lack of fear in battle. This trait made them formidable opponents, capable of breaking enemy lines and causing chaos among foes. In their berserk state, these warriors seemed immune to pain and injury, continuing to fight despite sustaining severe wounds. This phenomenon has led some scholars to speculate about the use of intoxicants or psychoactive substances to achieve their frenzied state. Berserkers held a special place in Viking society as elite warriors. Their fearlessness and combat prowess made them valuable assets during raids and battles. They often served as shock troops, leading the charge and breaking enemy formations with their sheer ferocity. Many berserkers were employed as personal bodyguards for kings and chieftains. Their loyalty and fighting skills ensured the safety of their leaders in both peacetime and conflict. The presence of berserkers in a leader's retinue was a sign of power and prestige. Berserkers were also involved in various rituals and ceremonies, often invoking the blessings of Odin before battles. These rituals could include chanting, drumming, and the consumption of intoxicants to induce the berserk state. Their role in such ceremonies highlighted their connection to the spiritual and supernatural aspects of Viking culture. In battle, berserkers were often used to break through enemy formations. Their ferocity and disregard for personal safety enabled them to penetrate and disrupt enemy lines, creating openings for the rest of the Viking force to exploit. This tactic was particularly effective against disciplined but less aggressive opponents. One theory suggests that berserkers may have used psychoactive substances to achieve their trance-like state. Some scholars propose that they ingested hallucinogenic mushrooms, such as Amanita muscaria, which could induce the symptoms associated with Berserkergang, including rage, strength, and numbness to pain. Another theory posits that berserkers may have suffered from psychological conditions, such as hyperarousal or dissociative disorders, which could explain their extreme behavior and apparent immunity to pain. These conditions, combined with intense training and ritualistic practices, could have contributed to their legendary status. The longship was the cornerstone of Viking naval dominance. Built using the clinker method, where overlapping planks were fastened together, these ships were both strong and flexible. The longship's shallow draft allowed it to navigate both open seas and shallow rivers, making it perfect for surprise attacks. This versatility was key to the Vikings' success in boarding and raiding. Viking raids were meticulously planned, often involving extensive reconnaissance and intelligence gathering. Leaders or jarls selected targets based on their wealth, accessibility, and defensive capabilities. The element of surprise was crucial, with raids often launched at dawn or under the cover of darkness. Viking longships approached their targets swiftly and silently, often using the cover of fog or night. The shallow draft allowed them to land on unprotected beaches or sail up rivers to strike inland settlements. Upon landing, Viking warriors disembarked quickly and formed into tightly knit groups. They moved rapidly, overwhelming any initial resistance with sheer speed and aggression. The sudden and violent nature of the assault was designed to instill fear and chaos. Once the initial resistance was crushed, the Vikings began looting. They targeted monasteries, churches, and wealthy settlements, which often held vast treasures. The loot included gold, silver, precious stones, livestock, and captives who could be sold as slaves. After looting, the Vikings retreated to their ships as quickly as they had arrived, taking advantage of their ship's speed and maneuverability to escape before organized resistance could mount a counterattack. When engaging enemy ships, Vikings used their superior seamanship to gain an advantageous position. They often employed feints and deceptive maneuvers to close the distance quickly. The chaos of boarding actions played to the Vikings' strengths. Their hand-to-hand combat skills, honed through constant warfare and training, gave them an edge in these brutal encounters. Viking swords were typically one-handed, with a double-edged blade. They were highly valued and often richly decorated, symbolizing status and skill. The axe was a favored weapon, with both small hand axes and larger two-handed Dane axes used in combat. The versatility and power of the axe made it a devastating weapon in both boarding actions and raids. Spears were used for both throwing and thrusting. They provided reach and versatility, making them effective in both the initial assault and during boarding actions. The sax was a single-edged knife used as a backup weapon. It was effective in close quarters and useful for both combat and everyday tasks. Viking helmets were typically made of iron and featured a rounded or conical shape to deflect blows. Contrary to popular myth, they did not have horns. Wealthier warriors wore chainmail, providing substantial protection. It was costly and time-consuming to produce, making it a status symbol as well as a defensive measure. Viking shields were circular, made from wood, and often reinforced with leather and iron. They were used for both defense and as offensive weapons, capable of bashing and pushing opponents. The Vikings' raids on monasteries and settlements along the coasts of England, Ireland, and France are well documented. Notable raids include the attack on Lindisfarne in 793, which is often considered the beginning of the Viking Age. Viking traders and warriors, known as Varangians, traveled through the rivers of Eastern Europe, reaching as far as Constantinople. They played a significant role in the establishment of trade routes and even served as elite guards, the Varangian Guard, for the Byzantine emperors. Ragnar Lothbrok is a legendary figure whose exploits are celebrated in the sagas. Although his historical existence is debated, he is credited with leading numerous successful raids and expanding Viking influence across Europe. His sons, including Ivar the Boneless and Bjorn Ironside, continued his legacy, becoming prominent Viking leaders in their own right. Harald Hardrada, often considered the last great Viking king, ruled Norway from 1046 to 1066. He had a storied career, including service in the Byzantine Varangian Guard and numerous military campaigns. His death at the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066 is often seen as marking the end of the Viking Age. This Battle of Edington at 878 was a decisive victory for the Saxon king Alfred the Great against the Great Heathen Army, a large coalition of Viking warriors. Alfred's victory ensured the survival of Wessex and significantly slowed Viking expansion in England. The Siege of Paris by Viking forces led by Sigfred and Rollo at 885 was one of the largest Viking sieges. Despite initial successes, the Vikings were eventually repelled, and the event marked a turning point in Frankish resistance to Viking incursions. This Battle of Maldon at 991 saw a Viking force defeat an Anglo-Saxon army led by Byrhtnoth. The battle is commemorated in an Old English poem, highlighting the heroism and tragedy of the conflict. Norse mythology played a significant role in shaping the Vikings' warrior culture. The pantheon of gods, including Odin, Thor, and Freyr, were often invoked for protection and victory in battle. The belief in an afterlife in Valhalla, where fallen warriors would fight and feast until the end of the world, provided motivation for bravery and sacrifice. The Vikings left a lasting impact on language and literature. The Old Norse language influenced the development of modern Scandinavian languages and left its mark on the English language, particularly in place names and nautical terms. The sagas, written in the 13th century but based on older oral traditions, provide invaluable insights into Viking society, culture, and warfare. The image of the Viking warrior has been romanticized and mythologized in modern culture. Literature, films, and television series have contributed to a fascination with Viking history and mythology. While some depictions emphasize their brutality and savagery, others highlight their adventurous spirit, resilience, and contributions to exploration and trade. The Norse Vikings, with their unparalleled seafaring skills, combat prowess, and indomitable spirit, left an indelible mark on history. As warriors, they combined strategic innovation with a deep-seated cultural ethos that celebrated honor and valor. Their legacy, preserved in sagas and echoed in modern culture, continues to captivate and inspire, offering timeless lessons in courage, resilience, and the relentless pursuit of glory.